Yeah, I told Scott that I was talking to you about your auto guiding performance, and he thought it was a great idea to give you a call.
Okay.
I've been meaning to, anyways. We haven't done anything like this in a while, Robert. So
No, I think the last time we'd done something like this was talking about the Arizona Dark Sky Star Party, which unfortunately got canceled due to
canceled.
everything.
Yeah.
Kind of a bummer. We were hoping for that.
Right.
We're still hoping for the Nebraska Star Party. We will find out June 15th on that, whether it's a go or no go.
So, guys, we're back live again here at Explore Scientific. A little bit earlier, we were in our QA lab and learning how to collimate an ED apple refractor with the Cheshire eyepiece. Right now we're on with Robert Weiss. He joins us from Joplin, Missouri, home of the home of Bonnie and Clyde, right? So. Right?
Yep.
Maybe I don't know if you're the sheriff of Joplin, is that right?
No, actually, I'm the chief of police for a small town just east of Joplin. We're about 3 miles outside the city limits, but we have tri-state explosives and other major trucking industry and stuff around here. So, but close enough. Everybody just, they're like, well, I've never heard of that place. Where you're from? I was like, Joplin, Missouri. That's close enough. They're like, hey, we know where that's at.
We know where that. Okay, got it.
We know where Joplin's at.
All right. Well, both Robert and his wife are into astrophotography. They do great work, and they attended the Arizona Dark Sky Star Party with us with David Levy that was held out at Carcer Caverns. We were supposed to do it again, but unfortunately, because of our coronavirus situation, we did cancel that event, and we'll plan to do it next year in May. So that's kind of the plan at this point. Earlier today, Jerry Hubble was talking to Robert Weiss, and Robert uses a G11 mount. Tell us about the mount system, about your astrophotography.
The mount that I'm using is the Explorer Scientific version of the Lost Mandy G11 with the PMC-8 system on it. And I picked it up, and I was originally using an Ioptron mount as well as an Orion Atlas and stuff, but I wanted something that was a little bit beefier and could handle a lot more equipment and be able to do some things that I couldn't do with the other mount. So with your help, I was able to pick up your system and put it through the ringer and through the test and everything, and I've been tweaking those auto-guiding stats and everything else on it and getting it down. Went out the other night. We had pristine skies for once in probably, a couple of months.
Yeah.
And so I got it down and actually had the auto guiding down to 0.01 and 0.02 periodic error corrections and stuff on it with a total error of like 0.15.
Now Jerry uses the telescope drive master to do this, but you're using software to do it. How does this work? What kind of software do you have?
I'm using the free version of the Push Here Dummy or the PhD2 software that a lot of astronomers have moved to, and it allows me to go in and tweak those settings to get to what I want it to do. So what I did is I started just playing around with settings and stuff until I can get it to where it was auto-guiding. And under the new software that they have an option that's called Predictive Periodic Error Correction.
Okay.
So what it is that over a period of time, it would start learning what that drive would do, and it would start memorizing it. And as it did that, I noticed that the PEC would go down on that, and it got it down from most often I was at 0.2 to 0.3, and now I'm down to 0.01 to 0.1 on that. So it did correct quite a bit of those. Now I'm in 10-minute exposures. I think my camera and auto guider is designed that if the star moves more than 0.5 pixels, it'll restart the imaging. And in a 10-minute sub, I don't have to do that anymore. It just continues right out. So in about a 4-hour session, I think I had to throw one sub out, and it's because a cloud passed through.
What? Oh, that's awesome. That is
did
awesome.
pretty good for what it was. So
Yeah. That's, Jerry and I talk a lot about trying to make the equipment disappear. You just want to get it set up so that you don't have to think about it, and you can concentrate, especially if you're doing imaging, you can concentrate on the image that you're about to make, so, and that is, that's the kind of thing you're looking at. That's what the TDM helps you do. Apparently this other software, what does this software cost?
It's free. It's absolutely free. It's on the open source. just Google Push Here Dummy or PhD2. I think it's phd2.org, and their software is downloadable. I think for Mac, PC, and it may be even for Linux. But it basically takes over the system and does a lot of features that a lot of programs can't do for auto guiding.
Yeah.
But basically, they called it Push Here Dummy. It basically tells the scope, hey, look, you idiot, the star's over here, and you need to go there, and it just tells it to do it, and it does it. There's not a lot that has to be done. Pretty much anybody can learn it. It takes about 5 minutes to set up, and you're ready to go.
Okay, now I found a website. It's openphdguiding.org. Does that sound
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm. We'll put that in here. So you guys might want to, if you're not using it, maybe you want to give it a whirl. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Now you've been involved in astrophotography for a long time, Robert. When did you get started?
I was 8 years old when I first got started in it. Used a Meade 8-inch F10 Schmidt-Casser gun and 35 millimeter black and white film. Learned how to develop and print that film and stuff. So I'd spend hours upon hours sitting in the freezing cold temperatures wondering if I'm ever going to walk again.
At 8 years old.
Yeah,
Wow.
8 years old. I got started in that and learned how to use all that equipment. And as technology along, I moved up and stuff and started with the CCD imagers, now in the CMOS cameras and CCD imagers as well. So
yeah. One of my friends, Dustin Gibson, who owns OPT, one of the OPT, him and Jenny St. Lawrence own it, and Dustin runs this Twitch. He's on Twitch, I think 5 nights a week, maybe 3 or 4 hours a night, something like that. And he brings on people to watch, a remote imaging session. So they have telescopes out in the desert and roll off roofs and everything that they're operating remotely. And more than once, he's had pretty young kids come on and learn how to take the controls of these telescopes with very advanced mounts, very advanced telescopes, and make images with some guidance from him, but he tells them what to do, and they actually drive it and they make the images. So I think it's so cool that that we have all the technology to do that kind of stuff. It's certainly with the Mark Slade Remote Observatory, these guys are doing serious science and all the rest of it. But to get your feet wet and just to try it out and see how awesome astrophotography really is, it's cool that there's things like that. So you should check it out sometime. It's called Gibson Picks on Twitch, and so yeah, I think he starts about in our area about 7 o'clock at night, or maybe it's 7 p.m. his time, because he has to, it has to get, of course, dark out there, and he's out there in California. So, but yeah, I like to mention all the good things that people do. Do you, Robert? Do you have like some of your images you can pull up on your computer? I'll show you how to. Do you know how to screen share on Skype?
Yeah, let me get over here and see if I can get that brought up right quick.
Let's talk about some of the images that you've made.
Where to go?
People love to see the images. Of course, they want to see us, but.
All right. You see my screen there?
Let's see. Yes, I do.
All right. The other night when I was out, like I said, I was out started right around 10 or 11 o'clock, because it doesn't get dark until about 9:30, 9:45. Spend about 15 minutes getting stuff set up. I was able to shoot M13 and the Swan, doing some test imaging and stuff with your 102 FCD 100.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
So
and right now, all I see. Okay, yeah. All right, now here we go.
Well, here's M13. Bring that up. This is about an hour's worth of data taken with the S-Big 8300 monochrome camera using a filter wheel and Optolong filters in 36 millimeter. About an hour. Luminance, red, green, and blue filters, and then combined and stacked in Max and DL and processed in PixInsight and Photoshop and stuff.
How do you like those Optolong filters?
I absolutely love them. I've actually been a beta tester for Optolong since they started with them, and have found a lot of issues and flaws that they had. And after some trial runs and testing, we now have all their filters down to 0. As far as I've seen, I've not seen any haloing issues and any issues with getting flat fields and stuff from them. They found out that there was some substrate issues with the optical glass they were getting from the company, so after determination, they've changed that. And I think they're on the 3rd or 4th iteration of those filters, and even the narrowband filters that we have 0 haloing issues that we've found on any of the optical trains that we've tested them with. So
we just bought some for the MSRO, the UBVRI filters for our photometric measurements. We just bought like a month ago or something.
You'll have to let me know how those work. I've not tested those yet. I've tested all the others and everything.
Okay.
Just let me know, and if you have any issues, let me know, and I'll get a hold of Jessica over at Optolong and get you in touch with their tech support directly.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm looking at, you know, who doesn't love M13? It's a beautiful, bright, globular star cluster in Hercules. The other one I like is M92, and I tend, when I'm showing people globular clusters, and you know, they may know about M13, but M92 is a little bit more tight, more compact than M13 is. M13 also has a little galaxy. Can you run your mouse over the picture there and point out the galaxy there?
There's actually 2 of them in there. A lot of people don't realize, but there's actually
let's find both of them.
There is this one here.
Right.
And then there's this one right here.
Viral. Oh yeah, look at that one.
And if I actually take it into PixInsight, I could run a plate solve on it, and it will actually show. I believe there was over, I want to say, 300 or 400 hidden galaxies, maybe more than that within them. A lot of these little faint fuzzy spots that we're finding are also the PGC galaxies that we can find hidden within the image itself. So there's a lot of detail and a lot of information that's hidden that you don't see when you're looking through a telescope, and a lot of times even when you're imaging, you don't even realize they're there until you run those registrations and stuff and can actually see everything that's going on within the image itself.
That's an important point about people that get into astrophotography, to get involved with these and download these catalogs of things so that you can identify what's in your image. People don't realize that there's, you know, these catalogs are very helpful. You don't just automatically know that stuff is there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's beautiful. Go ahead. Go ahead, Robert.
It's quite amazing because there's, even like doing some testing imaging, we were taking some CMOS one-shot colors, and we're using 30-second, 60-second exposures and combining multiple stacks of 200, 300, 400 stacks, almost like straight live video capture. And some of the images that we're getting, we even got it at the Arizona Dark Sky Star Party last year that we showed to everybody, is the thousands of galaxies that we got off of NGC 891 that were located in the background that you couldn't even see. And when you started seeing where all these PGC and NGC and other galaxies that were hiding within this area, it just kind of blew your mind that they were there. You can't see them through the regular telescope. You don't see them in a normal photograph. But even after these short exposure stacks, they all came alive. They were there, and you could see them, and you can identify them now.
This is a great image. Just to talk a little bit about M13 itself as an object. This was discovered by Edmund Halley, okay, in 1714, and then Charles Mercier cataloged it on June 1st, 1764. So, of a list of objects not to mistake for comets, okay. I'll point out that Charles Messier's telescope wasn't very good, and you know, he certainly was not going to be able to resolve individual stars like you can see this image right here. The M13 is about, it's just over 20, somewhere between 22,000 and 25,000 light years away. And and it has several 100,000 stars. Perseus was asking here how many stars are in that galaxy. While M13 does look somewhat like a galaxy, it's a globular star cluster. Maybe globular star clusters are like baby galaxies because they form a halo around galaxies and contain some of the oldest stars that they've ever measured. So it's very cool. It says also further that in 1974, Arecibo, the radio telescope Arecibo, sent an encoded message. They beamed an encoded information about the human race, DNA, atomic numbers, Earth's position, and other information, which is something that Stephen Hawking would advise that we should never do, is send information about where we are, which is kind of funny. But it was beamed in 1974, and of course this cluster is moving through space. So there was some different opinions about whether or not that by the time that our radio waves had traveled, 25,000 light years, whether or not that cluster would still be in a position to receive the message by the time it would have arrived. So that's, that hit or miss kind of thing. If you think that maybe there are, ways that we could communicate from star system to star system or galaxy to galaxy, if that would ever be possible, with everything moving, how would you get the message sent in the right direction to begin with? So it's pretty funny, but
yeah, it's wild.
it's wild stuff, which might explain something about if you look on Wikipedia and type in "wow" message, WOW, okay?
Oh yeah, the wow message. Right?
Yeah, the wow message. They got this message, and to this date, it's still a lot of it's a controversial message that they got. They know it was extraterrestrial in origin, but they were never able to listen to it again. Just once, and that was it. So, if you get it once, then maybe that doesn't really count. But so I've got some messages here. Cesar Brolo, he's down in the southern hemisphere, so he gets to see Omega Centauri cluster, nice. Which is amazing. Okay, you can see it from the United States, from like Southern California. They see it from the Winter Star Party. Maybe you could see it also from Texas. You have to be in the South, though. Anshul Puri says 300,000 question mark. That is a number that is thrown around also for M13 as far as numbers of stars. I don't know if they know exactly how many stars are in that globular star cluster. What is interesting, though, is that I've been told that if you were to fly a spacecraft right into the heart of M13, that it would be very unlikely that you would hit any star. They look so compacted, but they're still separated by a huge distance, each one. And if you were to build a model of M13 and take 500,000, I don't know, what would you use, P's or something like that? We could make this model. You would have to separate all the stars in the appropriate distances. By the time you were done, if you cut your model in half, you could set it over Antarctica. That's how big this thing is, okay? It's huge. And it's just one of dozens or hundreds of globular star clusters that are in the Milky Way galaxy. But you can also find globular star clusters around other galaxies like M31. I don't know if you've ever gotten an image of one before, Robert.
Some of the galaxies, yeah, you can get them. They're very faint, very small, and you need larger telescope to do. We've had larger telescopes in the past, and you can get some, but they're not as fancy as what you'd see with a large globular cluster within our own galaxy system here. Just kind of like looking at some of the nebulas and stuff in other You can see that the nebula structure is there, but there's not a lot of definition to them because they are so far away.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, let's let you go on to your next next thing here.
I did go ahead and plate solve M13 here. You can actually see all the galaxies that they have, the PGC, the NGC, and the IC numbers, as well as M13 in the middle.
Wow.
There
So,
are 28 objects within this small field of view here, but you can see a lot of those faint fuzzies that are hiding back there that just look like stars, but they're not.
wow. Very cool. Very cool. Probably there's more galaxies than that, I would imagine. So
There probably are, but a lot of them haven't been identified or categorized yet. I could probably go in and tweak that a little bit by going with a different catalog that may be more updated, but they're going off the VGA catalog that was downloaded for them European Astronomical Society and stuff on that. So
sure.
Robert, zoom in on
but do what?
zoom in on a couple of those. Show.
I hear some. Is that
Yeah.
your?
Kent Martz is on with us.
Yeah, Ken, I can't hear you. I hear you through.
Oh,
Scott.
you must be muted, Kent.
Yeah, it says muted.
Hear you now?
I can barely hear you. It's got to be that headset you're on.
He's wanting you to zoom in on something here. What is it that you wanted him to zoom in on, Kent?
Just pick something.
Just pick something. Okay. Well, look at PGC 208-2966. Wow. And you can see that there's like maybe an edge on or something, that PGC 208-2302.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them. See, there's looks like a spiral galaxy there.
Yeah.
And you can see that there's other faint fuzzies that are even
They're
fainter
all
than
over the place. Yeah.
that. Oh yeah.
They're all over the place.
And look at that nice little edge on there.
Yeah. Beautiful.
There's one right there that's not categorized in that,
Yeah.
but it looks like an irregular galaxy.
I was told a long time ago by Jack Newton that he said, if you just keep shooting a part of the sky, he said you will find all kinds of galaxies. He says most of them are not cataloged, and so I don't know what kind of program project you could get on to help catalog galaxies, but I'm sure there's one out there.
They do actually have one. I was actually part of a program that we go through, and you had to try to identify them based on their shape, the structure, and the density that they were at, and it was pretty difficult. They would send you the pictures, and you'd have to go through and try to categorize them. Then you'd have to have somebody else to actually come in and verify that what you're seeing is not just a faint star. So it was pretty tedious, and that project went on for a while, and then of course other things come up, and you kind of move away from it. I can't remember. It's been probably 5 or 6 years ago since I've done that, and I honestly don't remember the name of that program. So, but there are some programs out there that they do have.
Just get out there and Google and search it, right?
Yep, Google and search it. That's everybody's favorite is Google. So, but we'll move over to another one. This is the Swan Nebula that I just captured the other night. It's about 3.5, 4 hours of data on it in narrowband. These are all 10-minute subs, and so it's kind of nice. Of course, by that time it started to cloud up a little bit, and 4 o'clock in the morning rolls around and you're tired and ready to go to bed. So I didn't get as much done on it. I just kind of threw it together real quick just to show, but
excellent. Beautiful. Beautiful.
So how much management do you find that you have to do with the auto guiding system during your sessions? Do you have to bring it up every once in a while and look at it to make sure it's still working?
Nope. I'm using Sequence Generator Pro, and so if the auto guider stops, it stops taking a picture. Everything is fully autonomous. If I was trusting enough of neighbors and everybody else around that I could probably go to bed, I'd go to bed. But sometimes I just like the peace and quiet and be able to sit and watch things. But once the program gets going, it runs through the entire night. It even has, with the plate solve and everything, as well as the ability to do the meridian flip on its own and then plate solve and recenter and start. It's great because you can set the program, set it, forget it, get your entire sequence for all the objects you want to run an entire night. And there's times that I've done 4 or 5 images throughout the entire session. Makes it a long night, but it's well worth it when you're limited on nights that you have clear skies. That's a moonless night as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder, Jerry, if it would be an advantage to, I mean, you're already getting down to sub-arc second work with the TDM, but if you combine that with PhD 2 and this algorithm, do you think it could get better?
I'm not sure. We have a nearly excellent polar alignment. So the only extra that the auto guiding would provide would be for correction for drift, for declination drift.
I wonder if it could read the TDM signal and take that into account.
I don't. Well, it had to have its own interface for that. It had to be an alternative camera signal type of signal that it would read. Of course, it would. But the TDM does allow you to use auto guiding in tandem with the telescope drive master, where the signal gets passed through for the declination axis to the camera system through that and through the PhD guiding software. The performance would be much better, but there's also a thing in Maxim DL that we use, which is basically after every science image, we do 1 to 3 minute images. It will reposition based on any kind of drift. It would recenter the image automatically. So that's like a auto guiding system, but it's a long cadence auto guiding system where instead of every 2 seconds or 3 seconds where you update the position or you move the scope, you would move it after every image and recenter it. So that would mitigate any declination drift that you might have.
Sure. Very interesting. Well, you know, if we're going to talk a little bit about these objects here, the Swan Nebula is also called the check mark. It's also called the horseshoe and the Omega Nebula. Okay, so, you know, depending on what you see in it. M17 is an H2 region in Sagittarius. It is discovered by Philip Loys de Chassaux in 1745. Can you imagine that age of discovery in the 1700s when they're finding all this stuff? This would have been really cool. You know, they're finding new nebula, and you know, it'd be like a comet discovery today. Charles Messier cataloged it in 1764 along with his other list of things there, and it's located in the rich star fields of the Sagittarius area of the Milky Way. It's about 5,000 to 6,000 light years away, and it spans about 15 light years across.
You have to wonder back then what kind of setting circles they had to be able to do these measurements to know where the location was for these objects. It's kind of cool to think about how. Well,
you know, if you look at the progression of astronomy, I mean, once you get out of astrology, which, you know, a lot of astronomers cringe when they say, "Oh, you're into astrology," you know, they go, "No, I'm an astronomer," you know. But the fact of the matter is that astrology did play a big role in the formation of the science of astronomy, and you know, we did a bunch of course corrections to make that happen through the years. But you know, there was a once upon a time when it was all about position in the sky, and so they had those giant sextants and all of these things to get more and more accurate positions of the stars, you know, the fixed stars that we were talking about yesterday, you know, when in fact no stars are truly fixed.
Right.
Right? Okay,
yes.
What do we have here? This is a beautiful, this looks like a narrowband image here.
Yeah, this is a narrowband image. It's the Tulip Nebula, sorry.
Okay.
This was taken actually with your 8-inch astrograph when we were doing the testing and stuff on the mirrors and everything in the column. So this is just a narrowband. It's located in the constellation of Cygnus and everything. So
Yeah, it's this is also called Sharpless 101. Is one of the catalog items here. But it does look like a tulip. It's beautiful. There are other images of this where you see kind of the red H alpha, but the colors that you see here is, a sign from narrowband imaging. It was cataloged by astronomer Stuart Sharpless in 1959. Yay, that's when I was born. Okay, maybe it was done on my birthday. It lies at a distance of about 6,000 light years away. Very cool. Very nice image. And look how much nebulosity there was around it, the dark and light nebulosity. And these, what look like fingers lifting up into the tulip. These are probably star-forming regions, but lots of dust and gas in this region here. Shannon Templeton Morgan says, I'm enjoying this presentation. I love taking pretty pics as much as science images. Let me just kind of recognize some of the people who have joined us here. We've got Bergman Scooter, Charlie Walsh. He says, wow. Cesar Bralo down in Argentina. Charlie, again, I think perhaps he uses PhD. Charlie also watches Dustin Gibson on Gibson Picks, which is cool. Let's see, what other comments do we have here? Caesar says Omega, we talked about it, Omega Centauri. I guess Pix Insight is a very popular program. He loves that. Anshul Puri says, I'm with Stephen Hawking on that one. Oh, about not telling other people where we are if there's other people out there. Why would you do that? There's water here. Come and get it. Okay.
Hey, we're here.
We're here. We got food, animals. We got McDonald's.
They're just coming to serve man. They're just coming here to serve man.
To serve man. Yeah, that's right. It's a cookbook. Cohen is saying that he finds Pix Insight to be on the expensive side. Okay. I don't know. I don't know what Pix Insight
Pix Insight is on the expensive side, but there's a lot of other programs and other tools that you can use out there to do similar work. I've even gone and given demonstration with Kent at the Astronomy Club down there, and using Deep Sky Stacker as well as GIMP to do some photo processing for free software. We're getting into stuff. So.
So Ansel has a question. He says, if you point at a 127 or 140 ED-APO at M13, would you see similar to this image? He says he hasn't done it yet. So, a lot of people ask that question, are you going to, if you have a couple of different telescopes, maybe they're not that different in aperture, 127 to a 140 is not a huge difference. What's the advantage?
One of the advantages of having a larger aperture, of course, is resolution. The larger the aperture, the more light gathering power it is. It's basically the same thing as having two different size straws. You got a straw and a fire hose. Small aperture, small amount of liquid comes through it. Larger aperture, the more amount of liquid you can put through it. So larger aperture, the better the light gathering power, and the more you can see, and the more definition and resolution you can usually get, and the more contrast that you'll have with it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. He said he's sorry, he hasn't done it yet, but he's curious since he's interested in the eyepiece visual as much as the astrophotography. And even whether you're going astrophotography or just visual, and so more aperture means higher resolution, more light gathering, and that's what it's all about. That's the reason why they keep building bigger and bigger and bigger telescopes. So.
One of the big differences for visual use is that you'll be dealing with the atmosphere. If the seeing's not quite as good, then you'll see the stars will be rolling around. They'll be. It's not like looking at a static image after you've gathered the data for hours on end, for sure. Right. But you'll see stars. You'll see these discrete stars in the cluster. I've seen it through through other telescopes, looking at M13, you can definitely see all the stars. You're not quite as many, but you'll see the discrete stars. You just have to wait for those fleeting glimpses of still sky to see it.
Right.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
And Show Fury had a question about point 1.7 or
But
M13.
we just covered that.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, we just did that question. It's a good question.
Yeah. Sorry, I was sidetracked by the quality control.
Yeah. So we're kind of going through the questions right now. Shannon Templeton Morgan says, I'm really enjoying this presentation. I love taking pretty pics as much as science images. Thank you very much. You're getting kudos here. Shannon also says the sharpless image is fantastic. It's so tough to process that one, which has dust and gas over the entire background. Yeah. Stephen Hauser's back again with us. He had to chase a moose away. How do you chase a moose away?
Hey, yo, moose, get out of my way.
I mean, those things are huge, you know. We saw a moose in Yellowstone National Park. I said, keep the windows rolled up, kids. And they're a powerful animal. Ron Delval has joined us again. Thank you. Lynn, thank you for being with us. She said she wishes she was there in person. Miss seeing me at NEAF this year. I miss seeing you too, Lynn.
I met Lynn about 4, 5, 6 years ago when she bought a system from us. I think I helped her. I talked to her about it at the booth about 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And then Dennis Hess, he says he just recently purchased the ED127 FCD 100. Great scope. Thanks for all that you do. Thank you, Dennis, for getting one. That's great. So, okay, so now we can resume. What do we got up here?
This is IC5146 with the Cocoon Nebula. It's located just north of the Cygnus area. It's kind of a hard one to get because you have all this nebulosity, but you also have all this dark lane that comes out and through the areas and stuff. And this was actually captured with the FC 100 to 102. And this was actually a live capture in sharp cap with one of the ASI 1600 cameras, doing a live capture, about a minute exposure constantly for about 30-40 minutes. So does very well for those that have one-shot colors that don't like to process a lot. You can use that live capture feature in there and be able to do stuff like this as well.
That's a great image. What I love about this is it looks like it's a dark trail, a trail of dark gas or dark dust or whatever against all those stars, in that star field. And if you just kind of look at the whole image at once, you can see tendrils of dust lanes and stuff like that all through this star forest, so it's very cool. It's very cool.
Let's see what else we got up here. Here's another narrowband. This is actually an LBN 471. I believe they also call it the Lion's Head Nebula and so forth. This is the narrowband through that 8-inch astrograph.
Beautiful. What do you like you've been imaging since you were 8 years old, Robert.
Yes.
I mean, you're not an old man, but you've been at this for a long time. What interests you the most? I mean, are there any objects you just go, yeah, well, I'm not that excited to take an image of it because I've done it so many times. But is it something that you've never imaged before, or is it something really faint, or is it because you're using certain types of filters or whatever that allow you to pierce the sky? I'm not sure what gets you going. What gets your juices flowing about this?
What I like the most is more of a wide field view of all these nebulas and stuff that are up there, because everybody's into the galaxies and star clusters, but as over a period of time you see those same galaxies and star clusters, they're over and over and over because there's not much difference to them. But then you get into these larger areas of the nebulosity and stuff where there's a lot of H alpha regions and things like that. And then you open it up, the wider you get, the more you see and the more you can do. And it's like, wow, I didn't even realize that that stuff is there. Especially along the Milky Way areas, along Cygnus and stuff, all those H2 the hydrogen alpha regions and stuff around Satyr. The North American is a great example. Covers a large field of sky, but you have to have a camera lens, or you have to have a really wide field of view in order to capture it. But it's those things like that when you can see all this absolutely gorgeous material that's just hidden away.
Yeah.
You start capturing it with all these filters and stuff. You're like, wow, never knew it was there. And that's what I like the most is a lot of these nebulosity areas, all these nebulas and things like that, and just try to capture as much data as possible. But unfortunately, as it goes, you got your winter and summer, and then in your spring and fall, you kind of have your galaxy seasons and things like that. And it's just kind of like, you've seen one galaxy, you kind of seen them all. It's my motto on that. You got, when you have M33 or the Triangulum Galaxy, and then you have Andromeda, those are spectacular galaxies because they're hard to capture. It's not easy. It's not like some of these edge-on galaxies where you take the picture and, hey, there it is. M31 or the Andromeda Galaxy, there's so much range, dynamic range from the outer edges to the central core that you have to capture. So it's not just take one picture and there it is. You have to take multiple segments and then stack them kind of like you have to have, just the core, then the middle portion, then the outer portion, and then you have to process those in such a way that you can see all that detail.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what I've noticed about, these images can become like collecting things if you just do it the same techniques all the time. So pushing the limits helps you to discover new things about these same objects that you've seen in the past. And that's really I think a hallmark for driving the interest, to maintaining your interest, is to look for changes or new stuff. Like we were talking about yesterday, Scott, we were looking at a changing dynamic universe, not just a static universe.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So it's interesting the way that humans have evolved. We're going through like this evolution of, and I'll call it self-discovery, because we're interconnected with the whole universe. We're made of stardust. We're supported by this star. There's so many. You can't. If you start looking for connections in your life, eventually you're going to run in. If you keep doing one more connection, you're going to find out that you're connected you're hardwired to the whole universe. So, but it's interesting from a historical perspective how scientists have, in their measurements and their observations and stuff, has started to realize these facts of the interconnected universe. So, and I guess that's leading. We keep looking for this singular explanation in physics that ties all these things together. But to take pictures and to be blown away by how awe-inspiring they are, there's just something that just kind of hits your heart about this stuff. So it's cool.
Here's one that everybody's seen. This is the Eagle Nebula.
Yeah.
This is taken with a 6-inch RC using a live capture with a one-shot color camera as well. So kind of a fun one. It's really interesting, and when you can see all the different things, the pillars of creation and everything else that they have within it. This is also up there around the Swan Nebula as well. So.
Now, what kind of scope did you take this image with?
This was actually taken with an AT6 RC.
Okay.
So a 6-inch rich accretion telescope. I was at f9, but I used a focal reducer to get it down to about 7.6. Mm-hmm.
This is a 6-inch scope, you said?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. Excellent.
Now here's one that's always fun. Everybody likes this one because of the two different contrasting colors, as well as there we go.
The Trifid.
Yep. Oops. Go back one.
The Trifid's always great to see. Even with visually, you can really see the shape of it and these dust lanes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always interesting because in the area that this lies near the lagoon area, in fact, on this, if we were to go north on the image, which would be towards the top, we'd run into the lagoon area. There's a lot of contrast between the nebulosities, the dust lanes, and everything else in that region when you open it up and go wider. But yeah, with the blues and the reds and everything else that they have in there, it's a fun object. It is visually stunning in the telescope as well as on the screen when you image it.
Mm-hmm. So do you, what do you, how much do you know about the Trifid? I mean, you've got blues there and red hydrogen. I guess that's hydrogen gas at the top.
Yeah, usually hydrogen, then oxygen, and so forth. Probably a little bit of hydrogen beta in there as well.
Yes. I imagine the blue is reflected starlight. Is that correct?
Typically, the red areas are usually your areas where they're ionized by the stars themselves, and then typically a blue have usually been a reflective nebula, so they're reflecting the stars that are in front of them.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful, though. It really is. Yeah. Let's read some comments here. Ansel Puri had a question. He'd like to hear our thoughts about the difference between FCD 100 versus FPL 53. To be very honest with you, Ansel, the difference between those two glasses is so minute that I would say that FCD 100 is probably the better bargain. Okay, in performance, especially if you're going from a telescope that does not have, maybe has a much lower grade of ED glass like FCD1, which is how some of our first telescopes were delivered, was all FCD1, and we got great results with that. FCD100 looks, you can actually visually see through the instrument and see a difference. It looks very clean. That's just how I would express it. Of course, there's less chromatic aberration going on, even from going from one ED glass to the next, because they're all refractors and they all have some sort of CA in them. It's almost impossible to eliminate it altogether, like you would on a mirrored telescope, for example. But the difference between FPL 53 and FCD 100, I'd say not much, but to the enthusiast, not much sometimes is a lot. Okay, so I would say that your best thing to do would be to try to look through it yourself. And that probably can't happen till you can get to a star party again. But that's it. Yeah, Lynn was saying, you made a comment about seeing her at NEAF. Yeah, she said that was me. Ansel wants to know what camera was used to make these images. Are you using several cameras, or?
I have two different cameras that I use. One of them is the ASI, or the ZWO ASI 294 MC Pro cooled camera.
Okay.
So 11 megapixel one-shot color with a high dynamic range of almost 64,000 K full well capacity compared to their 15 and 20 capacity. I also, for my monochrome, is the S-Big 8300 monochrome imager that I use in conjunction with the Optolong filters and so forth. So
that 8300 chip cameras are awesome. They're really inexpensive and they're great. That was my first big chip camera that I got back quite a few years ago. The 8300 chips was a breakthrough, I think, at that time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and those S-Big cameras are tanks. They just go and go. I've got friends that still have the old ST7, ST8 cameras that they've been using for 20 some years, and they have no problems with them. The chips are still in the same condition as they bought them, and they're still getting great pictures off them. So it's just one of those things. Sometimes older technology can do better than some of the newer technology, maybe a little bit slower on capture, but hey, what works, works.
And you can find them on cloudy nights for a real good bargain. I bought a ST2000 XM camera that was retail for $4,000. I bought it for $1,000.
That's a good deal. That's a good deal. So, yeah, there are people that are always trying to increase push the limits on these things. So, and they'll buy a new camera. Every time a new camera comes out, they'll be looking at the next new camera, because they want a better and better, uh, you know, response from the camera, or and they'll do that with all their gear. So there's always a lot of used gear on the marketplace that's available, and it's a great way to get into the hobby.
The latest cameras, the big thing in the last couple years has been back illuminated cameras that increase the quantum efficiency from like 50 to 60 up to 80 to 90%, and it's really an amazing thing that they've been able to deliver fairly quickly on these consumer level cameras.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Robert is on the phone right now, and that's okay. What we got here is looks like M27, right?
Dumbbell, isn't it?
That's a dumbbell.
Yeah, that's the dumbbell.
Y'all hear me?
Lots of nebulosity around the dumbbell there. Looks like the bow tie nebula,
Yeah, it's kind of neat. It's kind of like a bubble. Also, kind of got the bubble shape, three-dimensional. That's the thing. A hallmark of excellent images is when it looks three-dimensional.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I think that
Can you guys hear me?
these objects are great to look at too through big telescopes. I've looked at planetaries. This is a planetary nebula, and they're so tight and compact that you can actually start to see color through a large instrument.
All right,
Like
sorry
the
about that.
60-inch at Mount Wilson, for example, where we take people sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's okay, Robert. We know you have a life.
Business, business, business.
Yes,
So,
that's right.
but yeah, this was actually taken through your 8-inch astrograph. This was taken with that one-shot color camera, the 294, but it was taken with the Optilong L-enhanced filter, which is basically a tri-band. It is hydrogen alpha, O3, and hydrogen beta that allows your one-shot color to capture those regions. That's why we're actually able to capture these lobes. This is not a very long exposure. This is probably a stack of about 15-20 minutes.
That's it. Wow.
That's it. 15-20 minutes, about 2-minute exposures, and that's what it is. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is that filter you were just talking about? That's kind of an interesting addition to a one-shot color camera. I hadn't heard about that filter. Is it good for science?
It's the Optilong L-enhanced. It's basically a tri-band or quad-band filter. It's designed to allow one-shot color cameras to capture narrow-band data. The only one that they're not capturing is the S2 data because it would be so faint even for a one-shot color to capture through that. But you do get the hydrogen alpha, the hydrogen beta, and the O3 data into it, so you can create these nice narrow-band, semi-narrow-band images of nebulas and things like that. They do not work well on galaxies because there's not a lot of narrowband in the galaxies in the first place, but they are great. I've even used them on star clusters, but great for nebulosity, nebulous areas, and things like that.
Oh, that's neat. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Let's see what we got.
Do you have any of your images that you took when you were 8 years old?
That stuff is all film, and I've never scanned any of that stuff in. I did have one of M51, which was a 2-hour photograph on film, on color film.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at it, I'm like, wow, I really stunk at that one because you had to sit there and look through an eyepiece with a guide or eyepiece and watch that star stay within that square on that guider, and then you had to manually move the scope. And well, when you're sitting there as a kid freezing in the wintertime, 2 hours, and then you take it and print it, and you're like, hey, that's great. And then you look at it today, and you're like, boy, that really stinks, because all the technology that we have today that eliminates a lot of that problem stuff. But Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the older pictures that I have over the years have been lost, or I can't find the negatives anymore and things like that. So,
You were probably the youngest astrophotographer in the world at
In the
that time.
world at that time, you probably were. You're
I
right
can't
in there.
imagine 8 years olds doing that.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
it was a lot of fun, but
He's
learning how to
developing his
set up
own
and
film at 8 years old, so
yeah, and
this guy's like a
the
genius.
guy that taught me is a good friend of mine. He retired science teacher from the school I went to, but kind of took me under the wing when I wanted to get into astronomy. And he was telling me that within a year I knew more about it than he did, and he'd been teaching it for years. And so that's what I got advanced in. So I was setting up the telescope and doing all that by myself, going in I was doing hypersensitizing the film using a hydrogen nitrogen mixture in a tank that we built.
Wow.
And would gas hyper that film all night, and then go out, splice it, put it in the camera, and take a couple of pictures, come back, go into the dark room, develop it and print it, and go, well, missed my target, trying to go back and do it again. So learned to do all that stuff, had a lot of time. It was great. It was a lot of fun. Kind of missed some of those days, but at the same time,
You're glad they're over, right?
You had to know exactly what you're looking at and how to get it lined up. You had to go out and find your object and make sure you were dead on. Well, cameras back then, those little screens that they had were hard to see through when you're looking at things that were like 8th and 9th magnitude objects.
Yeah.
You're like, well, is it in focus? Is it not in focus? So, but it was a lot of fun. But you take a lot of the technology and a lot of stuff that you learned as a kid, and then you can apply it to today's modern technology and do some fantastic things with it, because you know how to process, you know what it should be like and what you need to do. And so it's quite nice to be able to understand the physics behind it, the principle behind it, and everything else, and apply all that old stuff to the new stuff.
So, Ron Delval is asking, is burnout an issue after years of capturing objects? He said, or is the natural barrier of clouds a good enough of a timeout?
There's a lot of times where you're like, man, it is really clear, but I just don't really want to do anything tonight. So there are days that you will feel like that, because it's like, it's different if you have an observatory and everything's set up where all you have to do is just, open the dome or open the roll off, go out, set up, and you're ready to go. For my instance, I don't have that ability to do that in that luxury, so I have to roll everything out onto the driveway, get it all set up, polar line stuff. So it takes about 5 or 10 minutes to get everything set up. Beforehand, I used to have to actually get the tripod, unfold it, go set it in the yard, go get the telescope, take it out, little by little, take 45 minutes to an hour to get set up. So you had to make sure that you were in the mood to do that, because once you get set up, you're like, I hope it's not going to cloud up. I hope it doesn't rain, because it takes forever to set up, forever to tear down.
Yep, I did that for 4 years in my early on, 10 years ago when I started into this. I did that for 4 years, set it up portable, put it up and take it down. It took an hour, and I was very dedicated and passionate about it. It's amazing looking back at it that I had that fortitude to do that,
Yep.
Now, did you take a break like you're doing this as a kid? Was there like a break, like let's say in your teen years until you turned 30 something, or what happened?
Actually, all through my years, the breaks basically came when it was cloudy or a full moon.
I see.
Because it got to the point, if you're wanting to do astro imaging, you want dark skies, and so you took every advantage you could. I didn't care if it was if the moisture levels outside were high enough and we started to get dew. I would take whatever, I'd get a hot air dryer, just blow it on the optics to clean them off, but I continue on with what it was, because you were limited. For good astro imaging, you're limited. We figured it up just around my area. About 15 to 20 nights out of 365 would be pristine skies, enough to be able to, no humidity, no dew condensation or anything, and dry air. And it's just like, hey, that's great. The rest of the time, you're like, hey, we got 15% humidity, but I'm going after it anyway. So, cloudy nights, full moon, other things like that, or other events, it gets to the point where, hey, I've got other things I need to get done, and you just don't think about it, and then you're like, I really, really miss those nights, so you get back into it again. So, just like anything else. You want to do it for quite a while, and then you're like, I don't want to do it anymore. I want to sell everything and move on. Then you're like, no, I want to do it again. So
sell everything and move on. Well, and I think that you're lucky too. I mean, your wife is into this. There's a lot of women or men, they're in a relationship where one of them's like super interested in this, and the other one's like, nah, it's okay, or they're not into it at all. Like, that's their thing, and I don't know how they do it, but but you're
best thing
lucky. And I know some amateur couples that get along quite well, and are jealous sometimes of each other's equipment. So
yeah, it's because there's times that we'll razz one another. I'll be like, I'm setting up a telescope. My wife's like, oh, you're going to be out with your girlfriend, and I was like, well, yeah, she doesn't talk back to me.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's times she'll write, we'll razz one another about it and stuff. And she's good-hearted. She knows, she understands. Because a lot of the stuff I do, it's not just taking pretty pictures for myself. It's also doing testing and equipment testing for not only Optolong, but as well for Explorer Scientific when they need assistance with clients and other stuff. So I will take the time to do that. I'm going to get some pretty pictures out of it, but I'm going to make sure that the equipment that we're using is up to par, and that what the customer and client expect is what they're going to get too. So
yeah, right. So what else do we have here? The Trifid Nebula. A lot of people love that image. Ron was saying it was used on Star Trek, which I often remember that. Probably used it more than once. And that particular image of the Trifid, was that an APO or was that an RC that you did?
Let's see, that one. Let me get back up there.
You have to go back and look. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to look. This one here was actually done with that 8-inch astrograph.
Okay. Oh, this is a Newton. This is the Explorer Scientific, 8-inch photo Newtonian telescope. So.
Yep.
And you use the did you use our coma corrector, another coma corrector?
Yes, it was the matching HR coma corrector for it. So.
Okay. Beautiful image. Very nice. Of
course, we got the lagoon. Everybody likes this one because you can see it visually through a pair of binoculars.
Oh yeah.
It's really neat because it has a lot of dynamic range within it, from the central core out to the outer edges and stuff.
Right. Beautiful image. There we go.
That's what the Veil region, part of the Veil region stuff, taken with that 8-inch astrograph, narrowband.
That's always a nice object to image. It's different.
It's very nice. I'm going to have to put those images up with the scope. It's a nice little gallery. Dusty Hoskins says it can definitely be a battle. I know it. I know that. I'll sneak out quick to set up my scope because I think it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Yeah, whatever it takes, whatever it takes. You need to get out there and do observations,
I was thinking earlier that this comparison in flying, you got some family members that are scared to death of flying, and you have a pilot in the family. It's really difficult if your wife doesn't or your partner doesn't like it.
Yeah, right.
I was fortunate. Michelle loved to fly just like me, so it was a great thing.
Yeah, the balance of what you got to do in your life, family, work, your personal interests, those kinds of things, friends. Yeah, you have to mix it all. So beautiful image here. So we got the M51, and you can definitely see the bridge connecting, these two objects here. And a little galaxy up on top.
Now, what's always interesting about M51 is if you look at this region right here, what caused that? Because typically you got all your spiral arms and everything, but then you have this break right here, like something has gone through, or the gravitational forces have pulled it out and around. So that's always a neat one to look at up close, because you do see that. And I think it would be neat to take pictures from the last 50, 60 years and start comparing those to see how much did that move and whether it's moving inwards or outwards.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, zoom in on that if you can. I don't know if you're able to.
Nah, I'm not able to zoom in on that right now, but
Okay.
Yep, unfortunately, since this is on my actual web server,
Yeah.
I didn't have anything stored locally here, so.
Sure.
But yeah, it's really neat to watch
We'll have
that.
to look at that.
You see
I'll have to
that,
look
and it
at
just
that.
looks like something hit it and wiped it out. So it's not conforming with everything else.
Well, the other thing, and the fact that it's a linear feature, you haven't had any distortion due to the rotation of the rings. I guess that's the way galaxies are with the dark matter, is they look like they've spiraled and they'll continue to move and continue to change, but I'm not sure how much that is the case based on the dark matter that's in the galaxy and keeps the rotation rate fixed, and angular rate, you know.
Dennis is mentioning, he says, will the L enhance filter help when imaging galaxies? I have the L Pro and I'm using that now.
No, the L enhanced is only for narrowband objects. So your nebulas and things like that would be your best bet. The L Pro is what you would want to use for your galaxies and star clusters. I have both of them after doing a lot of testing with it. There's not a lot of data that comes through on that L enhanced because it's a narrowband filter. So continue with your L Pro on that, and then use the L enhanced for nebulas and things like that.
Okay. All right, this is a great image of a galaxy here.
Oh, this is always a fun one. M106 and the galaxies that surround stuff. This was actually taken at my remote observing. This is the Grand Mesa Observatory, is where I got the data for this from.
Okay.
This was taken with our RC that we have out there, and one of the larger QHY monochrome imagers and stuff. But this is just a monochrome image, just to get everything lined up. This is when we first got set up. So, but this is a fun galaxy because it doesn't matter whether you're zoomed in close or wide field. It's just a neat galaxy, as well as all these different structured galaxies that you see lying around the outer edges of it. And there's even quite a few more that are beyond this frame of view.
Yes. This is about 25 million light years away. Beautiful.
And of course, everyone's favorite that they want to, and this isn't even my best one. This is M31, and you can see the difference in the structure just from the central core, how bright it is out to the outer edges. This is one of the earlier attempts to do a wide field on it, and it's just hard to capture all that data and get it. You've got to. I think the best one we ever got was out at Grand Mesa, because they're at 6,000 foot altitude and pristine skies, and they had a large wide field camera that we were able to capture. But they're talking about like a week's worth of data compared to my little 30 minutes worth of data. So
right,
that's like a 4-degree
now,
field of view, isn't it? 4 degrees.
Quite a bit. This is the mono version that I got. This was the best image that I could get. The other one was a color version. I didn't get enough color data with it. But this here, you can actually see that I took 30 at 120 seconds. So about an hour's worth of data on this. And this was actually taken with the Explorer Scientific's 80 millimeter, also using a 0.8x reducer on it in order to get it to fit. But even then, at the lower corners in the upper right hand corner, I don't even get the entire galaxy. They're just
it's still
clipped,
out of the field.
Clipped. So it's one of those fun ones. It definitely needs a camera lens or a wider field of view than that. A good one is probably about a 60 millimeter APO compared to an 80 millimeter. That'll give you that nice wide field view in order to capture it.
Yes.
M33 is another fun one. It is more of a face-on, but its visual surface brightness is about a 9th magnitude. It says, it's funny because they say it's one of the brighter galaxies up there, but because of the visual base of about a ninth magnitude. It is spread out. It's harder to see. You can see it through the telescope. You'll see the central core, but you won't see the outer limbs and stuff. But you can see a lot of H alpha regions, little nebulas and stuff that pop out on this. That's what makes it an impressive galaxy, because when you do combine the H alpha and other narrowband in it, you can actually see those bright clustered areas and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, we were on earlier today with Gary Palmer out in the UK. You know, he took some time to sit in with us and show some of his images. And one of the images he showed was this nebula where all the stars are subtracted, you know? And he was showing like controversial images that he's done, where he's used different software to show motion and stuff like that, you know. But Gary's always trying to do things to inspire people also about astronomy. And you get people who are purists that say, no, that's wrong. This object can't look that color. That's not a real image. That's more art than science. You know, these kinds of controversies. But how do you feel about that? I mean, would you be someone that would feel that you're more of a purist, or you know, if you made all your images here and you subtracted all the stars, would that be something that would rub against the grain for you?
No, I think it's quite impressive, because there's a lot of times that with the stars removed, you can actually see a lot more detail hidden in the structural balance of those nebulas and clusters and everything else that you'd have within those confines. So I've seen a lot of astronomers do that, but then they will also reduce those star sizes just to kind of show where the stars at, and it makes it look really impressive, because for this, a lot of these stars, since all the stars that we see when we're looking at like galaxies and things, they're all within our central cluster, but galaxies are outside and all that.
That's right.
A lot of times all these stars, they're close enough, they become super bright, and they overpower those regions and those areas, and you're like, well, what am I missing? So reducing those stars and bringing out more detail and stuff is quite nice. And like I said, there's a lot of people that will actually do both. They'll reduce the stars, create a star map, and then they'll take out the stars out of the nebula, and then reintroduce them with tighter stars and smaller stars, and it makes them blink.
I see. Just so it doesn't overwhelm.
Yeah, well controlled. They're well controlling. They're using shorter exposures on the stars, and then they're superimposing them onto longer exposures for the nebulas and things like that. And it's quite nice. You can also keep, by doing the shorter exposures, you also keep the star colors a little bit more. They don't blow out like some of these red stars that we have. The central portion is blown out, whereas theirs is a completely red star, or might even get a yellow star. A blue star will be a pure star instead of a white star. So it is nice to be able to see those true star colors come back through without killing them.
Yeah. Actually, Gary Palmer just joined us here. So he mentions that you have some great images there.
Well, thanks.
And you do, yeah.
I'm still working with a lot of them, trying to get stuff down. Some of these are older, and it's quite neat to go back and look at stuff from 3 or 4 years ago, and then comparing to what I'm getting now. It's like, why do we even keep that old stuff? Well, you keep the old stuff to show you what you are doing to progress. Because if you ever get to the point where you start taking pictures that looks like something from 10 years ago, you should probably rethink what you're doing.
Yeah.
This is kind of a neat little galaxy cluster. This kind of reminds me of those old hard pieces of candy, you know, where you got the two ends that you just pull it and it pops out of the middle. So.
Which galaxy is that? Do you remember?
This is 3718. It's a faint galaxy that's up towards 3718, and it's galactic structure. It's a faint one. I think it's a 9th, maybe a 10th magnitude galaxy.
You really got that dust laying down really good. That's great.
Yeah, it's an interesting irregular galaxy. It's kind of got those spirals that come out, but and then you have these galaxies that are back here that are kind of warped. So I don't know. This could be that
gravitational lensing or something.
Lensing that's taking place around this area.
Yeah, NGC 3718 says it's about 52 million light years away, so that's pretty far back.
Yep.
Pretty far back. Anshul Puri says these images show stars of different colors. Just curious if that is due to redshift or color temperature, like surface temperatures.
Most of the stars that we have, since they give off their own light, they're not going to shift differently. So you are going to have your red stars, yellow stars, and your blue stars being in the pure forms that they have. When you take your RGB images and stuff, most often they're going to come out, unless you process wrong or you don't do something correctly, those star colors will go away if you're processing wrong or not doing something to maintain those star colors. Here's one, the Fireworks Galaxy. You can see the difference. You can see some of the blue stars, but you still see the red stars that come out.
Oh yeah. Very nice.
That's what a lot of astronomers try to do when they do process images. You want to keep those original star colors that you would see. There's a lot of times I've processed images, the nebula, whatever, looks great, but then you've lost the star colors because you processed it enough that that color has literally vanished.
Yeah,
they've turned white. Yeah, they've turned pure white, and you don't want that. Here's one, NGC 891. That's wide field.
Yeah.
And you can see a lot of those blue stars. Trying to keep that in, but you can see that the cores are blown out, so I've overexposed for those and stuff just to get the galaxy. But
it's hard to get everything to play right.
It is. It's one of those things where you have to learn to process it in different techniques and different ways. That's why a lot of times folks will process. They'll take short exposures for the stars, and then they'll do longer exposures for everything else, and then they'll do that star mask, remove the old stars, put the new stars in. Kind of a cheating way to do it, but sometimes you have to do it. It's just kind of like taking pictures of the Orion Nebula. There's so much that's going on in there.
The dynamic range of that is
crazy.
The
dynamic range is horrible on it. I mean, if you want the trapezium, you're doing like 2 and 3 second exposures, and then you have to expose the nebula around them, then around that, and then all the way out to the outer edges. And then by the time you get done, it's like a high dynamic range in order to bring all that detail out.
Yes.
So it's difficult to do, but it's one of those things that you learn to do. You learn to mask, and it takes a lot longer. It's not one of these things where like, hey, I'm going to take it, and 5 minutes later you process it and spit out something. You know, it's not like going and getting a piece of film developed and go, hey, look at this. You know, so there's just a lot that goes into it. I think more often astronomers spend more time processing than they actually do the imaging. You know, you might spend a couple, 3 hours on capturing the data, but you'll spend a week processing, tossing out everything that didn't look right, and either going back and reshooting your data or processing it again. So
people are commenting here. Caesar down in Argentina, he says I agree that over the equipment or software ever is the main work of the astrophotographer. He says your work is amazing. Dennis Hess, pretty sure you measure redshift by using spectroscopy. Yeah, that's true. You see where the absorption lines shift into the red, you know, so that's how you can tell. It's like that Doppler shift. Gary Palmer says holding star color is one of the hardest things to do. The latest CMOS cameras are good at that. Yeah.
Yep, they're very good at that. But like I said, if you expose for detail in outer nebula or a galaxy and stuff, you end up washing out your stars. You lose your color and stuff, especially when you're trying to get a lot of things. So it is very difficult. Now with using monochrome cameras and using a luminance, red, green, and blue filter, you can actually expose all your greatest time in your luminance.
Yep.
And then do short exposure with your color, because that luminance tells where that color needs to go, and when you combine all that, you don't have to actually shoot as much color data, is what I found. And in fact, the color doesn't even have to be in focus as much as what it does for the luminance. And to even test that, I had taken a monochrome image of just a standard door on a wall that had a lot of color, and then I blurred the camera lens and then took a color picture of it slightly out of focus, and then used the luminance on top of that color, and everything popped and was crystal clear and sharp. So all the luminance does is show where all the brights and the contrast and stuff, and then you fill in the color data onto that luminance and everything, and it works really well.
Nice image of the moon. You got several here.
Moon's always fun. Of course, with this, it's so bright that I end up having to use either an S2 filter or an H-alpha filter to cut the moonlight down, and then using millisecond exposures on that CMOS camera in order to capture. Otherwise, it just washes it out.
Yeah. Gary Palmer says he loves the capture, gets bored with the processing, even though that gives the results. So that's true. I spent a lot of time in the darkroom as a teenager and young man, and I always loved the processing side. So
It's a lot of fun. And it's really neat because I can spend all night taking pictures and stuff, but most often a lot of people are very impatient. They want to take the pictures as fast as they can and then process the prettiest picture ever, not realizing that it may take you a week to capture that data just to get something halfway decent.
yeah,
Well,
That's the problem.
that's right. The preparation for the processing it's like when you restore a car. If you don't spend the time sanding out the car, you're not going to have a great paint job at all.
Yeah.
You got to get the best
you
data
got to
you can
prep.
get.
Yeah, you got to prep.
Yep.
Dennis Hess asks, do you always use darks, flats, and bias frames for everything you image? I've heard some people say they are necessary, and others say they're not necessary. So
What you have to look at your sky conditions. Where I'm at, I have what they call a Bortle 5-6 sky, so I've got a lot of light pollution and stuff, and so I actually have to use flats and in order to correct those optical aberrations and stuff, the dust motes and things that show up. But if you're at extremely dark skies, you're not going to have to use those flats like you would at a site where there's some sort of sky glow or light pollution. You do have to use dark frames because the longer the exposure, the more that you have hot pixels that stick out, other items that come about. And so what those darks will do, they'll subtract that out.
mm-hmm.
And then bias, if you're using a CMOS camera, you do not need to use the bias because the bias is located in the dark itself. Now, if you're using a CCD camera, bias is great because it does help correct for the flats that you're taking and so forth. So with the new technology that they have, a lot of the newer cameras don't really need a lot of darks. I've used the QHY163 and the ASI cameras, and I've actually done 2 and 3 minute exposures without darks. Because over a period of time, they average out or they sample out the more images you stack because that's random noise. It's not like a CCD camera where you have fixed noise patterns. CMOS cameras have random noise patterns. So over a period of time, that can average out. Now, the only thing is with CMOS cameras that you have amp glow that's located either on one side of the chip or on the other. So you do have to take dark frames in order to remove that portion of it. But as for hot pixels and things like that, you can average that out.
Mm-hmm. Stephen Hauser saying that cloudy nights are for processing. That's true. Or maybe taking the significant other out for a dinner date. Ron is asking, do you think amateurs overprocess the moon where the rims are white and where there's a white line around the edge, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, there's a lot of times you get images where they're either under-processed and there's not enough definition to it, or they're over-processed where they've just literally sharpened the thing up and you have a white crisp line on the outer edge of the moon. Your whites, your highlights are blown out and your dark areas are too saturated dark, so they don't have that fine balance where it's just a natural-looking image.
Yeah, I've found I'm into lunar imaging quite a bit, and I've found that if I can make it look more like a film image where you have a slight amount of grain in the background, slight amount of noise, and then, like you said, balance the edges, that it looks a lot more natural and looks a lot better than this over-processed, sharpening. Actually, the sharpening causes some of that too.
Oh yeah, people over-sharpen, trying to compensate.
Yeah, see, this is one of those. I balanced it to where the highlights are not overblown and where the darks are not darks. They're just a light gray color to match what you typically kind of see. That's what I do. The outer limb is not blown out. I have processed it before where I'm looking at this area here and it looks great. Then I get to this outer edge and it's completely blown out. So then you have to go back and start from scratch. And you do it little increment by increment to get everything to balance out properly.
Right. Yeah, there's some guys that just do images of the moon. They're
Yeah, there's lunar and planetary imagers. That's what they live for. They live for just.
Yep. Perfect seeing,
And,
great
oh yeah.
details.
Well, the nice thing with the new technology, the CMOS cameras that we have, with the ability of them to be able to capture video frames, they can actually eliminate a lot of the scene conditions and a lot of the issues that we have to deal with by capturing 1,000 frames. And then out of that 1,000 frames, maybe 200 of those frames are in perfect condition. So they'll stack those frames to get a nice sharp image and eliminate all the scene conditions. That's why we're starting to see people use the C14s, with the 120 mm and a UV-IR filter blocked on it. And they're getting all these nice, really sharp, high-definition crater images that are up close and personal. Yep. Whereas before, if you were using film, you were lucky if you didn't get it to blur, Mirror lockup was great, but even then you still had to do a hat trick on a lot of stuff, and it was hard. It wasn't as easy what we have today. So
that's true. That's very true. That's very true. Well, that's great. Ah, the Pleiades.
Yeah. Now this one's always a fun one to try to image, because not only do you have the brightness of those stars, but you also have that nebulosity that's faint. There's also a few galaxies that are hidden within this nebulosity that they've discovered, and it's kind of neat when you can run this and actually see those galaxies show up.
Yeah.
But it's not an easy object. It's not one of those you're either going to overexpose the stars to get all the nebula around the area, or you're going to have to underexpose everything and then tweak in post-processing. You're going to have to tweak those nebulous regions and mask out those stars to keep them from overexposing. And here you can see the stars are somewhat overexposed. They're not as overexposed as I've had them before, but you start to get those bright spikes coming off from those chips, those CMOS chips, start to get that little pattern going on based on the microns that they have, the spacings and everything else that they have for some of those chips.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that a little bit? I'm interested in what you think about that.
You're talking about the on the matrix of those
chips,
right? Flares. What they've done, the smaller the microns they have, the closer they are, so they get bleed over artifacts. And so when you get down to these like 2 and 3 micron chips, when you start to saturate those, they start to bleed over and create these little patterns. And if you have a filter in front of it, you start to get those concentric ring effects going out in these star-shaped patterns,
right,
in all different directions. And what that is your top, that is a front illuminated sensor that gets that pattern, because all that light comes in, then it's reflected back off in between that and creates that multi-effect pattern.
Right.
A lot of the other cameras that are back illuminated sensors, they have that filter gate on front so that it's illuminated from behind. You don't get that pattern, which is quite interesting. But yeah, these cameras are so sensitive that they actually start to get those ring effects. I've not seen them on cameras that have a larger micron value, such as 5 to 7, because there's enough gapping between those that it doesn't bleed over as quick and doesn't reflect or have those internal reflections like they do.
That's what we were talking about earlier, Scott, with each pixel has its own amplifier circuitry.
I see. Yes. Well, it's really important that you're picking, once you've got your mount and you know what telescope that you're going to put on it, this camera that you pick, if you've got this budget or whatever it is that however you're going about this, the camera's really also very, very important, especially with all the new advances.
Yeah, the camera is once you get your mount, the mount is the most important thing that you will ever buy, because you could have the most expensive telescope camera, but if your mount is the cheapest mount ever, you will never get anything. You might get some moon pictures and maybe some planetary pictures, but you're never going to be able to do what you want to do. So always start off, when you're going to buy equipment, buy a good solid mount that can handle the equipment you want to put on it, as well as be able to do exactly what you want it to.
Right.
Now, I've spent years upgrading slowly from simple German equatorials to fork mounts to everything until I finally settled on that G11 with the PMC8. And phenomenal mount, phenomenal equipment. You guys have done a fantastic job with that. It is my pride and joy. And that thing does everything I want it to. I don't have to worry about it. I plug and play, turn it on, and let it go.
Awesome.
And it'll hold everything I want it to. The next thing you have is your optics. It's just like if you buy a digital SLR camera, if you buy a $10,000 camera, but you put a $50 plastic lens on it, you're going to get $50 images.
That's right.
So, next thing you have, so you've got your nice mount, you need to put good quality glass on that because it's going to make a big difference.
Yeah,
you could spend $300 or $400, buy a decent telescope, but the optical quality of that may be subpar. I mean, a lot of those telescopes they have that are in that price range have just been manufactured and shipped out. You usually find them at Walmart, Target, places like that. It's the Christmas bunch.
The Christmas scopes, yes.
Christmas scopes that everybody's like, wow, this looks great. And then they go and see a real scope and they're like, well, that doesn't look so great. But so you put the good quality glass on it. The next thing you want to do is you want to find a camera that will do what you want. You want it to be able to cool. A lot of people use digital SLRs. They're great. They're fantastic. You can do a lot of things with them, and especially if you're one of these guys that I go out and take pictures on the side, daytime travel, and then at night I'm doing stuff like that. But if you want to get into the really long exposure and to be able to cool the camera and stuff, you have to find a good camera. You also need to match the pixel size to the theoretical resolution of your telescope. They say typical seeing averages between 1 to 2 arc seconds. So you want a camera that can sample within that. So a lot of times these newer cameras, they will actually bend the chip if it's able to be bent to get it within that resolution so that you have the sharper clarity and resolution. Sometimes you can undersample it and your pictures will turn out grainy and look great. So when you're putting everything together, look around, research it, find out what you're doing. The best thing to do is Google search and find out who's using the similar equipment and what results they're getting. Because there's a lot of times that you'll buy a camera and a good telescope or something, and they don't work together. They're not very compatible. You end up with some really grainy images all the time. They just don't work because your seeing conditions just don't allow for it.
Well, the other thing with spinning is that depending on your skies and if you get a really small pixel camera, you can oversample pretty easily. DSLRs are, I think, notorious for oversampling, and you waste a lot of disk space. It's really wasted space on your disk to oversample an image.
Yep. So.
Do you have photographs of your setup, of your rig?
I've probably got several different setups.
Let's see what your rigs look like.
That's one of them that I had. That was the RC6 on the old Ioptron IQ45. It's got a QHY 163 monochrome with the matching CFW2 filter wheel. Okay. With Optilong filters and stuff. There's the ES102 FCD 100 on the Ioptron. That's one of the older ones. It's an old Optic Star or an old Bosma. It was a knockoff. It was a great scope. It was a tack driver. Even though it was a doublet, it was great for narrowband imaging stuff on Orion Atlas. That is the ASI. That's a 178 which is a monochrome imager with a Zago filter wheel with the full setup.
Yeah, it's a huge filter wheel back there.
Oh yeah, and which is quite interesting. It's huge, but it has I think it has 9 position filters or 8 position in there, including the dark frame filter and stuff. So I have since sold that scope and that camera and the filter wheel off and upgraded to a larger format. You recognize that setup?
I sure do. Yeah, there's a G11.
It's got the pull master on it.
Pull master.
STF 8300 with the CFW2 filter wheel. It's got a 60mm guide scope with the SI120. This is when we did that astrograph testing on the mirror and collimation and stuff like that to get that all lined out for those scopes. So.
Wow. Now, you roll these scopes in and out. You've got a tripod dolly for all of your scopes, or just for the big one?
Just the big one here. All the other ones typically are ones that we use to travel with, so they don't come out of their boxes very much.
Okay.
So now since we've taken that old 127 case that you gave me and modified it to fit the G11 in it, now we can take the G11 everywhere and be able to pack it
That's
up
why
into a
you
nice
wanted
little
it. I
crate.
see.
So made it real nice. Good use of
Yes,
old stuff. So
that's right. Yeah, Caesar recognized it, that's for sure. Um, any
I do not have the new setup with the new camera and filter wheel. I haven't posted that just yet, but yeah, this was taken just last fall, I believe.
I see.
So, but that's a very nice setup, easy to use.
And you just do this in your driveway, all these images.
I set up everything out in my driveway, and
Wow.
we're right now we're facing south.
Yeah.
I'll just pull it out and set it up. I've got a little place on the driveway that I just set up, and the line takes about 5 minutes to pull or align everything, have the computer system up and going, and off I go. Just program Sequence Generator Pro for what I'm going for, and let it play solve and go. So
Yeah. So your garage is your observatory.
my garage is my observatory. When it gets really, really cold out, I can close that garage door and sit inside and hopefully stay warm and not freeze to death.
Yeah. I was wondering about that too.
There we go. That's that FCD 100 102.
Mm-hmm.
8300. I have upgraded the filter wheel. I've upgraded to the newer version of it, to the CFW3. It allows for the filter wheel to be operated both clockwise and counterclockwise to fastest position compared to the older ones where you'd have to wait for it to cycle all the way around all 8 filters to get to where you needed to go. So
You have what focuser do you have?
that is a Rigel focuser. That's that in focus that they have. I went ahead and went with that system because with all the systems we had, it fit that 8-inch astrograph really well. It also fits my wife's FCD 100, the carbon fiber she has, and that scope. So I could swap it from scope to scope without having to buy new equipment to match it.
Incredible. Looks good. Now, when you said a lot of times you will, if it's cold, you'll go into the garage. Do you have an onboard computer that you're talking to your telescope, or you just have lines running out to your?
Actually, I actually have a Wi-Fi system that I have. This down here,
Yeah.
right in here, is actually a computer that I have. It's a little Dell desktop. It's a mini tower. Has 10 USB 3.0 ports on it, front and back, and allows me to connect Wi-Fi to it. So when it's nice outside, I will actually set up a table, set up the monitor and stuff, and be able to sit there. But when it's really cold, I can connect to everything via the Wi-Fi and just run it that way.
I see. Interesting.
Do you use TeamViewer, or I use Type VNC to remote access? Is that what you use, TeamViewer?
Actually, being local and on the remote, I actually use the remote desktop within Windows itself. It runs a lot faster, and it doesn't have to go outside the network and then ping back into the network in order to work. It's just a direct connection. So that's one of the things that I use. If I'm running outside the network from somewhere, I will use TeamViewer. We do have another program. I'm trying to think what that one is. That we use for the remote observing that we have out at Grand Mesa. For the life of me, I can't remember what the name of it is. It's been a while since I've used it and stuff.
Is it? There's AnyView, I think. There's one of them, and then there's a desk something.
And then
we use Type VNC.
Yeah, we haven't used the Type VNC because typically the connections we may have 4 or 5 technicians actually connected to the same system, running diagnostics and doing whatever else we need to. So it allows for up to 10 connections to one system at a time. And we have 7 systems out there. So.
Excellent. This is really exciting. Well, gosh, Robert, is there anything that you want to wrap up with here?
Can't think of anything. If anybody's got any questions or anything.
I can't think of anything. Here we have a man that's devoted his whole life to astrophotography. I think everybody here really enjoyed your images, and it's great that you spent some time to share it all with us. So that's awesome. Cesar Brolo, don't ask your wife. What did you say, Cesar? Don't ask your wife that maybe you have more money spent in astro equipment than in cars. Yeah, she's into it too. She's got her gear as well. So, and
Yeah, she's
she
got,
does a very good job with astrophotography. So, yeah.
yeah, she's only been in it about a year now. She doesn't like mosquitoes and she doesn't like cold nights. So
Yeah,
she's in
yeah.
that habitable region. You know, Nebraska Star Party she'll go to, and other star parties she loves going to it. Um,
Yeah.
She is one that buys the big fogger to bring with us to Nebraska Star Party because those mosquitoes are like pterodactyls up there for about an hour before the temperature drops enough to where they finally go away and hibernate someplace. But yeah, she's been into it slowly but surely. It's one of those things. She's got other things to do, and
Sure.
she's just
Yeah.
like anything else. You know, it's kind of a little fun hobby thing, but I think it's more or less I get it set up for her, and then she plays, and I have to do everything else.
Ah, I see. That's how it works. Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. Well, I know that she gives you a lot of liberty with this, so that's really good. Really cool. Um, so, we had John Johnson on, and we talked at length about the Nebraska Star Party. What are you going to make that trip if they decide to open it up?
Yeah. Yeah, that was one thing that we're looking for. We'll find out hopefully June 15th whether it'll be a go or no go.
Hmm.
We are planning on going. I've got the vacation time scheduled for that. It's something that we've done for the last 5 or 6 years for our family, and it's great to see some old friends and the camaraderie we have with other astronomers from all over the place. So hopefully this year will be a great turnout. Even all after all the lockdown and stuff, I'm pretty sure a lot of astronomers would like to get away and go to some dark skies and just get out of the cities and stuff for quite a while.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I hope everything works out for that. Um, I you know, I'm still kind of undecided about making a trip like that at this point during the coronavirus. But I think that if you got if you have a trailer or an RV, I don't know what you're going to do. Do you plan to tent camp, or how are you going
No,
to do this?
we always tent camp. That's just one of those things. The kids go to sleep. My wife, she'll stay up for 2 or 3 hours, and then she'll pass out at the computer like most people do. And the rest of us will stay up all night and go, and then we'll try to sleep during the day. But right now, I know for a while that Nebraska, they had it where the parks were closed to tent campers,
Yeah.
which doesn't make sense because they are secluded. They're off by themselves, and
Oh,
it's
they're
like,
way off by themselves. Oh
oh
yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so, that's going to be one of those things when we get to the Nebraska Star Party. I don't see why they wouldn't have it because astronomers are very good at secluding themselves and keeping their distance because we like our peace and quiet and we like dark skies. So
Yes.
it's nice to talk to a few people and everything, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see how it goes and play it by ear. But we'll most likely be tent camping. Simply, it's a lot less hassle than transporting a trailer up there or a small RV.
Yeah. Very much. Yeah. It's a lot more. Uh, my daughter's going tent camping here in California. And it's just something. It's the way their family bonds. So that's really cool. Very cool.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Robert, for joining us. And we will, I think that we have pretty much a wrap up for the day. We went through mounts today. We had Gary Palmer on from the UK as well. That was great to have him on. Two astrophotographers, uh, today was Mount Day. We went through mounts pretty thoroughly, and and then we learned how to collimate refractors, so that was cool as well. So,
So
uh,
Robert, if you wanna stay on after we sign off from Facebook, I can show you the observatory and we can look at the TDM for a couple minutes. I can show you what I was talking about earlier.
Okay, perfect. Love to do that.
guys, thank you very much for hanging in there with us, and we will see you tomorrow. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.